PED, or Pressure Equipment Directive, changed, look at where we are now. Obviously, we've had Brexit, we've had some changes, and we're going to talk a little bit about some refrigeration and heat pump systems. We're going to look at whether the PSSR, Pressure System Safety Regs, can be used as a vehicle and how it can be used as a vehicle for compliance of assemblies of pressure equipment in the UK, and maybe whether addressing the HSE requirements of so far as is reasonably practicable is a better way of approaching this than using trade legislation. So, you know, the world we live in today, we see changes to it all the time, whether we're worrying about our ESG compliance or whether we're managing our regulatory risk, which is part of what we're talking about today. But all of it really runs down to making sure that we protect the brand and reputation of both our employers and our clients so that we do the right thing at the right time in the right way. You know, the regulatory landscape changes, and that's what Dave's about to introduce us to when the PED came in, and ultimately we've got to look to stay compliant in all of these things.
Okay, thank you, Simon. In the paper, I talk about an interview with the RAC magazine that I did in 1992, but I'm going to wind the clock back a little bit before that time. In the mid-1980s, I was invited to a meeting with Presscold. At the time, they were manufacturing pressure vessels at their field operation. And these were very simple vessels, a piece of pipe with a couple of end caps on the end. And they wanted to export these as part of their condensing units to the rest of Europe. And we sat around a table and looked at the various requirements to get this one simple vessel into the rest of Europe. And there were some great minds there at Presscold at that time, and we ruminated over this and concluded it just wasn't possible. Each of the countries that they exported to, Italy, France, Germany, all had their own regulations. In Italy, it is Ispesal, Codap in France, Merckblatter in Germany, and so on. And whilst one would accept another's materials, they wouldn't accept the welder qualifications, they didn't allow the same allowable stresses, and without all getting geeky on pressure vessel design, we gave up on the idea. Following that meeting, I was an AOR. In the 80s, the IOR used to have an evening conference in Mark Lane, and some refrigeration used to be there, Forbes Pierce and Anthony Brown and Peter Cooper amongst others, and I would have been whinging about how unfair this was, that we couldn't easily export to Europe, and yet we were accepting vessels not only from Europe but from around the world. And Peter Cooper said to me, well, it's no good whinging at me, Dave, get and do something about it, be a voice at the table. And that came about. I joined the IOR technical committee, from there got nominated to sit on the BSI committee, and the PED was just at an embryo stage at that point. And if you think it's a difficult thing to deal with now, you should have seen it back then. But well, that's all very well, Dave, but what does it do for me? What did the PED do for us? It's not what the Romans did for us, but what did the PED do for us? Well, it introduced consistent technology, consistent terminology, I should say. It set about defining essential safety requirements so that everybody was playing from the same point of view when it came to design. Materials, joining specifications, they were all harmonized against, eventually all harmonized against the new directive, and a pressure vessel standard was developed as well. Unfortunately, that standard didn't come out until 2 years after the directive became law, but such are the workings of European standards writing committees. But now we have common requirements for documentation, data plates, instructions in use, and all of this facilitated the free movement of pressure vessels. Alas, Presscold had stopped manufacturing by that point, and it was too late for them and for many others. And now we're at the situation where we all work to the PED or the PESR, and for the purpose of this paper going forward, if I say PED, I also mean PESR. And just to confuse things, interlinked with this is the Pressure System Safety Regulations, the PSSR. The differences are that the duty of compliance with the PED stands with the manufacturer, and the PSSR generally the owner or user of the equipment. Now, I've seen a comment on LinkedIn about, well, that's all very well, but we comply and the Europeans don't, and really not so. The Europeans have for a long time had a history of working to upfront approval. It's been enshrined in their standards. In the UK, British standards are considered as best practice, whereas in Europe they were enshrined in law, and our European partners or European manufacturers for a long time have been dealing with upfront design appraisal and verification during construction. So that's what the PED changed. It gave us free movement and a common platform for vessel manufacturers and equipment manufacturers to work from. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you, Dave. So where are we now? Because, you know, obviously Dave's talked about where we started off, how we moved through the PED, and how we ended up with a European way of doing it. And then the UK decided that we'd leave Europe. And originally we talked about having a UK CA mark and having the UK standing as the gateway to Europe, using some of the European regulation, but standing with a UK mark. That process now has changed slightly. The UK CA mark still exists and is still possible, but the UK will also accept CE marking. So what we have to remember is that CE marking needs to be applied by a European body that has been appointed by a member state. So that won't be a UK company or body, it will be a European one. If it's applied in Europe and then imported into the UK, the body or entity carrying out the import will take the responsibility for holding the documentation. And because the UK authority is unable to go to Europe easily and chase after whoever it is who's made the equipment, if there are any issues, it's likely that that importer will be the first port of call and potentially the only port of call for the UK authorities in doing their enforcement. So we need to be aware of that when we're moving forward, but it does give us a degree of confidence that we can buy these things already certified. When we bring them into the UK, we have to consider that we need to place a mark on them if they're an assembly, and we either place the CE mark on them if we're using a European body, or we can place a UK CA mark where we're not. With regard to in service and putting into service, we need to comply with the pressure system safety regulations, as Dave's mentioned. The PSSR has got regulations 4 and 5 that talk about design and construction, and certainly it will be those regulations that are picked upon by the authorities looking at what we put into service and by the body who is coming along to act as the competent person and carry out the regular verification of the safe operation of the equipment. So we will see the UK CA mark and the CE mark in various different guises next to each other. And as a result of that, we need to make sure that we've understood our roles and our responsibilities as we bring them in. They're not quite the same as they were when we were in the EU, because we're now a third country, so we need to understand that. And I'll talk in a little while about some quite useful guidance that's available. But in the meantime, I'll hand back to Dave to give us some examples of some refrigeration and heat pump equipment.